If you're building your home studio, you need acoustic absorbers to improve the acoustics of your room. Room acoustics are very important for mixing and mastering, but they are even more important for recording. The problem is that good acoustic absorbers are pretty expensive considering the amount you may need, and the cheap ones, which are only made of foam, are pretty useless. So your best and cheapest option is to build the absorbers yourself. It's a very fun process. It's a bit timey, but you're definitely gonna enjoy that. And most important, you're definitely gonna enjoy the results afterwards. This is what you'll need. First, you'll need an insulation material. The most widely used material is rock wool, and you can get that everywhere around the world in any hardware or home improvement store. It is very cheap and effective, and it's easy to work with. Then you need wood to build the frame in which the rock wool is gonna go. Wood is also very cheap and is easy to get everywhere. And then you need fabric to cover the absorbers with. I ordered the fabric at Amazon, but you can probably find it also in some local store as well. Then you'll need some tools to assemble everything. You definitely need staples and a stapler. I use a manual stapling machine because it's the cheapest, but you can get an electric or pneumatic one, which don't cause any fatigue in the hand. But a manual works perfectly fine. Theoretically, you can do everything with that and a screwdriver and some screws, but I definitely recommend to use a driller to drill holes in the wood and screw the screws in, because that will definitely make everything easier. I will cut the wood myself with a saw, but you can get the wood cut in the length in many hardware stores as well. Step 1. Building the frame. Okay, this is pretty easy. You just need to drill holes in the wood and drill the screws to get the pieces together. I do 2 screws per corner to give it good stability. One would not be enough as the wood could move in that case. Try using something to get the pieces assembled as straight as possible. If you don't have anything, just use your hand as I do. I like to sand down all the edges of the wood so that the surface remains nice and smooth, but this is not a must. The next step is to place the rock wool inside the frame. I build the frame exactly the same width as my rock wool pieces, so I don't have to cut too often. But if that's not possible for you, just use a bread knife to cut the rock wool, as you will see in a moment. My frame has also the same depth as the rock wool I am using, so I would recommend that as well. I really recommend using gloves and a sweatshirt to cover your forearms, as rock wool can be itchy on the skin. For the remaining part, I just cut a piece of rock wool using a bread knife, which works very well. Okay, so once we have this ready, it's time to cover the frame with fabric. Choose the color that suits your studio best. I like white because it looks very clean and fits with almost any other color or any kind of light. It's very important to stretch the fabric as much as possible to avoid any wrinkles. If you put the right tension, it will look very well, believe me. Always go in one direction on both sides to keep everything uniform. I use the same piece of fabric for both sides. I just turn it around and keep doing the same. This way you can use the absorbers on both sides. The same goes for when you're doing the upper side of the absorbers. Stretch everything as much as possible to avoid any wrinkles. And when you're doing corners, try to find a way to make it look a bit nice, and this is always the most difficult part. I'm not taking too much time making the staples look nice, as I will put another frame outside the fabric, which will cover the staples. But if you're gonna leave it like that, which is perfectly fine and works the same way, try keeping the same space between the staples. When finished, I just cut the remaining fabric with a knife. Again, I don't care how it looks right now because I will put another frame. If you're not doing that, try to finish it as nice as possible. Okay, so this is how it looks. It's perfectly fine to finish right now. In fact, that's how I did it for most absorbers in my studio. But I want to go a bit further and make it look even nicer, so I will build another foot frame and fix it outside. So we start all over again. I am cutting the wood, but this time the pieces need to be a little bit longer to fit out the entire absorber. Once it's cut, I drill every piece of the outside frame to the inside frame. In this case, I just use one screw per side. For the part above and below, I need to use two per side since there is already a screw in the middle from the inside frame and I can't drill through the screw. Okay, so that's it. As you can guess, the absorber gets a bit heavier with this outside frame, but it's still easy to handle and I think it looks way better. You could also paint the wood in a different color if you want another look, but I like its natural tone. To hang this on the wall, I use a similar technique to hanging a picture on the wall. I use 2 eye hooks on the wall and 2 square screws on the absorber, and this is sufficient for the weight. On the bottom side, I just place a piece of wood or another screw to keep the same distance to the wall as in the upper part. It's very good to keep a bit of distance from the absorber to the wall, as this increases the absorption rate. If you want to hang the absorbers to the ceiling, you can use the same method, but you just use a chain and it will make everything easier. Okay, so that's it. As you can see, it's pretty easy. It's a bit timey and requires some tools, but if you plan to treat a big room, I definitely recommend investing into these tools, because in the long term it will be much cheaper to build the absorbers yourself than to buy them. So as you can see, my studio is full of absorbers. I put absorbers in the back side, in the rear side, in the front side as well, and also in the ceiling, very important. Since this room is pretty small, my goal was to reduce the reflections as much as possible. If you've got two rooms, you can play a bit with having a room for live sound, which can have a bit more reflections, and have a room for mixing, which should be almost completely dead. But if you're in doubt, just use as much absorption as possible, because it always will sound better.